Last week, we discovered that for the first time ever, London's murder rate overtook New York's. More than 50 people have been slain in the capital this year and scores murdered nationwide. The government has announced new legislation to help fight violent crime, which actually won't do a damn thing to stop young black people being murdered by other black people. Rising knife crime does involve race. And it's not racist to say that, because it is young black men being stabbed and not, as former race equality boss Trevor Phillips points out, young white boys in Surrey. Predominantly black areas have to be policed differently to many white areas without people screaming racism, because communities are different and they need different ways to control crime. Yes, we need more officers visible on our streets, but Theresa May's decision to reduce stop and search by nearly 80% has had disastrous consequences. We mustn't listen to the liberal elite screaming that it's racist bringing it back will damage relations with black communities. What's racist is letting black kids die horrible deaths to prove what a diverse and compassionate society we are.
Wow. First of all, I am thrilled that you care about the fact that there are young black children dying on our streets.
Why would you say that?
I'm happy.
That's such a silly thing to say.
Why is that a silly thing to say?
Why wouldn't I care?
Well, I'm saying you've just shown that you care, and I welcome that. Why do you have a problem with that, Carole?
Well, because you're
that's not what I thought we were going to be debating.
I don't care, but of course
that was the thing I thought we were not debating, because you established it in your intro. But anyway, the thing I have a problem with is the approach you suggest as the answer, right? So I'm not that interested in whether London's murder rate is higher than New York's. If there are people dying on our streets, that is a problem. Doesn't matter where you compare it to. The fact is that there is something going wrong, and that these are complex things, and that I absolutely think that we need to make it a political and social priority to address it. To reduce this to a question of stop and search is, in my view, completely misguided, because stop and search has not proved itself an effective deterrent against violent crime. And just to put into perspective, you mentioned the fact that stop and search has been reduced by the police. The reduction in stop and search has affected white people far more than it has black people. Black people are still being stopped and searched almost at the same level they were before the cut. So the idea that this is the reason for the rise in violent crime is because black people are not being stopped and searched anymore.
Do we just want to see the figures for the stop and search reduction? Let's just look at this graphic. Stop and search figures. In 2011, there were, in 2010-11, 1.2 million. In 2016-17, it's 300,000. That is not just all white people not being stopped anymore.
Well, the number of stops and search on white people has been reduced by nearly 30%, and the number of stop and searches on black people is reduced by just 10%. Mm-hmm. And there are also facts that show that stop and search on black people is far less likely to lead to any evidence of crime. Now, the picture that's being painted here is that stop and search is being...
This is just simply not true. In the past 4 years, knife crime has escalated by nearly 70% in the past 4 years.
But the stop and searches are not leading to the prevention of that crime.
Can I come in?
And that's a fact.
I really do believe in speaking frankly and bluntly. If there's a disproportionate number of Muslims, for example, involved in terrorism, then I would like to be able to acknowledge that. Likewise, if there are a disproportionate number of young black kids involved in knife crime, we have to acknowledge that. Yeah. I do believe, however, that the correlation in rising crime with the reduction in stop and search needs to be tested scientifically. And so when the College of Policing and the Home Office both ran independently surveys on the effectiveness of stop and search in reduction of crime, they found that there was no significant relationship, and the word significant was used, in the increase of stop and search and the decrease of violent crime in the area. If, on the other hand, the science demonstrated that the two were related in a causal way rather than a correlative way, I would have a harder time making this case.
So the fact that the police now don't have the government backing to take the weapons off kids on the streets, that's not a problem at all,
the last point I make is that crime has been falling overall in New York. As well as stop and search. No.
Yes,
that was my second point. That stop and search has also been terminated in New York, and crime has been declining.
Yes, stop and frisk has been incredibly successful in New York.
The new mayor scrapped it, Carole. The new mayor scrapped it.
Between the middle of you two, so I could be the victim of a crime if I'm not careful, or drive-by shooting. Can I just clarify with you? After you said something really interesting. You said the number, or you had figures that showed the number of stops on black people has reduced. Where did those figures come from?
Those figures come from, I think there was Home Home Office data. I mean, I can show
Okay,
you afterwards. But the
because-
statistic I've got
Hold on a
is
second,
that the stops on white
okay.
people reduced by nearly 30%, and the stops on people are black, and not just black, but black and ethnic
And I know you want
minorities
to come
only
in.
reduced by 10%.
Okay, because those figures didn't seem to chime with the others, but there we are. We'll see
Because
that.
Carol's figures are the general figures, not breaking down the decrease
Okay, let's
of
okay,
ethnic
hold on.
let Nick speak.
You're both right. You're both right. Stop and search
what
in and
about
of
me?
itself.
I said something.
I'm not allowed to say anything.
You're right. Stop and search should be brought back. Theresa May was criminally irresponsible
Yes.
when
Why
she
should it
lectured
be
the
brought
police
back,
in the
Nick?
way
Yes.
that she
Why?
did,
Yes.
because and it is disproportionate that it is young, not necessarily black, non-white. I think we say. If you look at the gallery of photos of the victims in London, they're not all necessarily black. Some are mixed race.
Let's give me one white British name in that roll call of
Well, my
victims.
name's what's my name? You are right as well. It is not solely going to be solved by bringing back stop and search. There are massive issues. There are issues of absent fathers. Many of these, particularly lads, grow up without dads being around. There are family issues as well. There's areas of deprivation.
There's school
and there's areas of
exclusion,
education.
which is a huge factor.
It's school exclusion. So it is a multi-fact, and I hate to use this expression, but multi-faceted, but it is not as simple as stop and search, Greg.
Thank you, Nick.
You're already there.
I'm shocked to be allowed to get it. Let's just see what Theresa May said when she was Home Secretary.
Nobody wins when stop and search is misapplied. It is a waste of police time. It is unfair, especially to young black men. It is bad for public confidence in the police.
Apart from the fact that it shows you what a few years of Prime Minister does.
I was gonna say,
She looks about 50. Yeah. But apart from that, if you go back to what she was saying at the time, she was saying the police were using this indiscriminately in many cases. And if you actually look at the figures from Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, 27% of stop and searches happened without reasonable grounds, even though they've been approved by a senior
Which means they were
policeman.
illegal.
Which means they were legal.
Yeah.
But let's not get deep into just the stop and search thing. I mean, clearly, and all the politicians who you see talking about this who've been involved talk about this is multifaceted. There's lots of reasons for what's happening. Actually, you've got to be very careful. Although there's a spike happening in deaths this year, actually, we're nowhere near where we were 5, 6, 7 years ago. I mean, they came down for a long time, and now you've seen this spike. Now, it's important that we understand what you can do about it. But I think just to jump on stop and search...
I never said it, and nowhere in that intro did I say that stop and search, that was going to solve everything. I didn't say that, but I think what we have to acknowledge, and this is what Trevor Phillips knows more about this than I do, he says, we have to acknowledge that this has a racial and cultural aspect to it. And what he also said, which I find very interesting, he said all his experience of black families is that they welcome this because it's their young people who are being slain. So they're not worried about it in the same way that lots of other people seem to be.
And
this is why
The only thing I'm worried
Is the
about,
stop and search
the only
aspect.
thing I'm worried about is us framing this debate in a way that actually doesn't get to the solutions. No one wants black children dying on our streets. Who would want that? That's why I started out by saying I welcome your commitment to that. If we're serious about helping young black people who are getting caught up in this crime, why have we slashed youth services that are proven to give young people an alternative to the violence on the streets? Look at the Scottish model, where they've taken a public health approach to stabbings, and they have the 35 stabbings of young people that happened last year, none were in Scotland.
You say all of that. You say all of that.
But Caribbean boys that are affected by this are
let's go to a
168
community
times
activist.
more likely to be excluded. There are solutions to this.
Stafford Scott is a community activist from Tottenham. Let's hear what he has to say.
Do you really, and the policy makers really think that the kids are sitting at home this morning watching this programme to learn that there's fewer police and then thinking as a result of that we're going to go out there and do something? It doesn't matter the numbers of the police, it's about the pressure that the state, the oppressive state, is putting on these young people that's making them respond in the way that they are.
Now, whether we agree with the precise language or not, whether we agree with the precise language or not, I think the broader point he's trying to make there is, to Afa's point, that there is a whole bunch of services for young people that are being cut. They're not feeling like they're being heard, the opportunities they're lacking. And I worry that actually perhaps, though, yes, we need to have a toolkit response, an array of responses, I'm not so sure scientifically stop and search hasn't been demonstrated to contribute to the solution.
Can I just
so
say
it
one
could
thing?
make racial tensions
Can I just
worse.
say one thing?
Can I bring this, and I promise, because I don't know whether you all saw some chilling work done by Sky News' peerless Martin Brunt when he actually interviewed a gang member about the thief of a rail. I don't know whether you saw it. If you didn't, indeed, some of the viewers now. This is Martin Brunt from Sky News talking to a gang member. You have to listen carefully for some of the audio. A gang member who identified himself solely as Dylan.
What did it feel like to stab someone?
Well, when I stabbed someone, it didn't feel nice, but I had to, as I said to you, I had to do what I got to do. But I said that I need the money at the time, and I see this guy, he walked past me in a nice Rolex, so I had to stab him to get that, because he was trying to fight back, so I had to stab him. I stabbed him 6 times.
That sounds like you nearly killed him.
Nearly, but he's still alive now. He's still alive. I don't know.
Shocking.
Yeah, I just want to say that I get the problems that a lot of the young black youth are facing, but we can't say that's the same for everybody. When kids go out on the streets with 10-inch blades and machetes and they kill people and then they boast about it on social media, they're not vulnerable kids, Afua. We have to accept that some of what's happening is actually wicked. It's not all to do with vulnerable kids.
Okay.
Some people, and the way this boy is talking.
Okay.